Okay, wait.
This is Steve Hannley,
This is Adam Beck.
This is Kevin Dunsmore.
and we're talking about quite possibly the biggest PlayStation 4 exclusive in the history of the console.
Battleborn, yeah.
Yeah, although that's on Xbox One. So I guess then
wait.
we'll talk about Uncharted 4, Thieves' End, because
Right.
wait, is that on Xbox?
I don't know, we have to fact check that. Kevin?
It's published by Sony.
Ah,
They
yeah.
would never allow that to happen.
Well, that's the call from the first base umpire. So Beck, now Uncharted 4, Thieves' End.
Yes.
It's the first time Naughty Dog, the developer known for games such as Crash Bandicoot, has actually decided to make a fourth game in the series that they've
To a degree,
created.
yes. Unless it was a kart racing game.
Well,
It's not a mainline game, though.
and there was Last of Us kart racing as well.
Yeah, I can't discount that. I
That
mean,
was fun.
entertaining.
Ellie
What do
was.
they call that? The Left Behind?
Yeah.
So, Beck, Uncharted 4, where are we picking up here? What is the length of time that's passed since Uncharted 3?
I'm not entirely sure. I know it's at least, I think they say at least 3 years.
Several officially.
So, sure. Yeah, I mean, they go into saying early on that it's been a couple of years since Drake and Sully have worked together. So it's basically Nathan Drake has hung up his holster in favor for a regular job as a, I guess he scuba dives and collects stuff under the sea.
Yeah, it's a regular job.
Yeah,
Working
more or
Joe,
less.
blue collar.
Yeah, more or less.
9 to 5.
9 to 5, working out on
Does he get a lunch break?
papers. You know what? He didn't get one in this game. Not that I know of. Screwing the little man. But yeah, takes place after Uncharted 3, where he and Elena are now married.
Did she take his last name? Or did she hyphen it? I mean,
I have
is she
no clue.
progressive? Is she
I
a
have no-
feminist?
They just call her Elena. They
Ah.
don't call her Elena Drake. So
Check the credits.
yeah, I got to do that. But yeah, after so many years, his brother shows up at his doorstep, which no one really knew he had a brother. It wasn't mentioned in the last 4 games.
Isn't there actually some continuity issues with that? Because they say he was like an orphan, right? At some point.
Yes, I mean they addressed that pretty much right at the beginning.
Oh, do they?
Right in the first chapter, in the second chapter, really, how pretty much why he wasn't mentioned at all, and it works, I guess. It does seem a little weird to introduce him pretty much right at the end of the saga, but I mean they had to give Troy Baker some work, right?
Yeah. Is it Troy Baker?
Yeah,
Ah.
him and Nolan North
Jeez.
at it again.
So, Naughty Dog hit a huge milestone in 2013 with The Last of Us in terms of storytelling. With Neil Druckmann back as the creative director for Uncharted 4, how has the story evolved from what we've come to expect?
So I definitely think it's significantly better than Uncharted 3. I didn't really enjoy Uncharted 3 as much as the other games
Huh.
from a story and scenario perspective. This, I remember them talking it would be darker. It doesn't really feel darker. It's more emotional. I wouldn't go to the lengths of calling it up to The Last of Us levels, but there are some rather not really tear-jerky moments, just very tense and emotional scenes between him and Elena. And yeah, the story overall is fairly well worked out. I do think the antagonists in this game are not fleshed out at all, which is probably my biggest disappointment with this. In that, like, it's basically
Wouldn't you say that's a weakness of the Uncharted franchise, though?
to a degree, but I mean, you look at Lazarevich. He was this really cool, badass antagonist who just kills anyone, and even what was her name, Marlowe?
Yeah, Catherine Marlowe.
Catherine Marlowe. She had this kind of grace to her that kind of was she was imposing throughout the story, whereas Rafe and I think Nadine are just in the background, just a nuisance, just an ominous nuisance with an army at their back, and you barely get to know them. barely, other than like, oh, she's a badass and he came from money. And like, I felt it lesser than the other games.
Was that Laura Bailey that voices Nadine?
Yes, which yeah, she she gets a lot of work too.
So, with Neil Druckmann coming as creative director, Bruce Staley came back as the overall director, much like he was in Uncharted 2 Among Thieves, which is considered to be the best Uncharted game in the franchise so far. How has the gameplay evolved in Uncharted 4 versus the previous games?
Well, I mean, it's similar in the sense that it's still a cover-based shooter. I mean, you're gonna get behind cover, hang on ledges, aim, shoot. There is more of a stealth element to a lot of the scenarios. Like, it's the game isn't entirely linear as it was in the past. There'll be far grander areas to explore, not to the level of like Rise of the Tomb Raider, but it's more, I guess, focused in a sense, with just these breathtaking set pieces and just locations you can explore. The stealth element is basically you get to jump on the enemies a vast amount of times. Other times they get to jump on you, so you can avoid combat altogether, and it's actually really cool because I'm like a big stealth guy. I like Metal Gear, I like approaching situations differently, and just getting like just going through a area and just methodically taking out one guy at a time is just so entertaining. And of course, they added the grappling rope, which is primarily used for like combat scenarios, but it's you become very vulnerable when swinging, and it only works when there's someone in the vicinity and you can actually perform a takedown with this, but that rarely occurs because they're usually in cover or well, the AI is just really good in this game, so it's the gameplay is way better than a lot. These additions they make it way better, just from just a grand scale.
And there are no clickers.
No clickers, none whatsoever.
Whew. So beginning in Uncharted 2, Naughty Dog introduced multiplayer. It was a fun little diversion. They tried to expand it in Uncharted 3.
Thanks to Subway.
Didn't quite catch on Storm like Battlefield 3 or Modern Warfare 3, which also came out around that time. But now they're back in Uncharted 4 with more multiplayer.
Yep.
Is it any good?
It's all right. It's serviceable. I mean, a lot of people will have fun with it, especially if you dig at the gameplay mechanics, which the swing mechanics are heavily into this. I wouldn't put it on the level of like Call of Duty or other people hate me for saying this, but like Halo 5's Warzone or something like that. It's light on content. I mean, there's
well, how many maps and weapons are we looking at here?
Well, definitely looking at 8 different maps. Some of them are pretty good. I really like the can't remember what it's called, but it's in I think it's the auction house. But you got only 3 different modes, or technically 4 if you count the ranked team deathmatch, which there's team deathmatch and ranked team deathmatch for whatever reason. And yeah, I don't know. You can unlock a lot of characters, emotes, hats. I mean, those are pretty big right now. And there is kind of a microtransaction element to it, where you earn coins to spend on a in-game store and unlock various characters, items, and so forth. But I mean, if you like the gameplay of Uncharted, you'll enjoy this. But just don't expect the Naughty Dog to break any new grounds with it.
Now, with those microtransactions, is it just the microtransactions, or are they charging for other multiplayer content?
From what I know, all their DLC forthcoming is going to be free. So,
wow, that's pretty nice.
Yeah.
But no microtransactions in the single player, right? That is strictly
that is strictly what you pay is what you get. So, I mean, even when you lock the game, you don't have to buy like the different filters or anything like that, the cheats or whatever. It's all right there.
Now,
Nice.
the player-controlled dialogue options is a first for the series. Uncharted 1 through 3 did not have them. How do those play into the game? I mean, do they feel like an afterthought, or is this like a Mass Effect kind of BioWare system going on here?
It's 100% an afterthought. It happens maybe, I think, 3 times, and it's basically
Really?
just a story element where it's like, oh, maybe you'll tell this guy this story, or it actually happens more times than not right at the beginning, and I think they just discard it after that. I'm trying to think of a time after the third chapter when they use it. I can't remember. I don't think they use it after that. And it's just, I'm very curious why they put that in, because it feels like an underutilized mechanic.
So it's pretty much just a to B story. There's no diverting paths.
No, there is zero diverting paths. It's not, as far as I know, its ending is the ending. So.
But the ending comes after quite a lot of gameplay, does it not? I've heard 13 to 15 hours for a typical game.
Yep. It took me about 14 to 15 hours
Wow.
to get through the game, plus about 60% of the artifacts found. It is a substantial game. I'm actually really surprised because they're usually what, 8 to 10 hours long.
Right.
But I guess the new open areas just add additional content to explore and new ways to go about forward with the encounters.
So let's talk about what Naughty Dog is really known for, and that's pushing console hardware to their limits. How good looking is Uncharted 4?
It is, in my opinion, the best looking game I've ever played. I think
Even compared to Crysis on PC.
I mean, Crysis now, as good as it looked back then, it does not look good now. Like, I mean, people can go back and you add the mods, and I'm sure it compares to Uncharted 4 in some sense, but I mean, Uncharted 4 is, like I said, in my opinion, the best looking game, beating out The Order and any other game I've played.
What about from an artistic standpoint? I mean, technically, it's the best looking game, but how's the art direction?
It is absolutely beautiful. The way they set up the locations and all the, like, a big problem I had with the third game was it was a lot of desert, a lot of brown, but it's a lot of tropical, very reminiscent of the first game, lots of foliage and whatnot. And I mean, there are locations such as Africa, Scotland, that have different vistas, like just beautiful views all around. And yeah, it is, the art direction is phenomenal. I'm blown away by it.
Does this graphical fidelity transfer into the multiplayer as well?
To a degree. I mean, it definitely doesn't look as good. I think they downgraded the graphics a bit just to make up for 60 frames a second. I mean, it's far more chaotic in multiplayer, so it's hard to gauge the visual fidelity other than the spectacular special effects and the explosions and whatnot. But, I mean, the multiplayer still looks really good.
And there's some visual filters I've heard, too, that you can make the game look differently.
Yeah. I mean, there's the cell shading, some mosaic and whatnot. Some are unplayable, but, I mean, it's nice to have them there.
It's kind of a rarity for a console game.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, cell shading alone makes specific games work. I mean,
right, like Tony Hawk.
Yes, like Tony Hawk.
Like Battleborn.
Sure. Does that have cell shading?
I don't think so.
It's more
Battleborn?
like,
Yeah.
that's not really cell shading.
It's Borderlands cell shading.
You're thinking of cell damage.
I would call that more like just an artistic style. I mean,
It's just kind of cartoony.
But anyways, so as the swan song of not only Nathan Drake's story, but potentially Uncharted, wrap it up, Beck. Is this the game PlayStation 4 users have been waiting for?
absolutely. I think while it has some issues with like the antagonists and multiplayer being just okay, I think it wraps things up perfectly, and it is just a visual spectacle.
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 I
Thank
agree.
you. And yeah, it is something if you own a PlayStation 4, if you like action games at least, you should give this definitely a try.
Would you call it the killer app for the PlayStation 4?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, what else has the PlayStation 4 had? Like Bloodborne and Infamous,
Club.
if you like that. Well, Drive Club launched pretty poorly, but
Killzone.
anyways, yeah, it's Uncharted 4 is the game to get for PlayStation 4.
All right, well, you heard it here. Uncharted 4 is now available exclusively for the PlayStation 4.
No.
In stores now and digital. Beck, Kevin, thanks so much for joining me. And you can check out Beck's Uncharted 4 review right now, featured on hardcoregamer.com.
What? Is that it?